Battalion 1944, I think it's fair to say, has had a slightly uneven path through early access. It launched into early access, which is a statement that only makes sense in these trying times for gamers, in 2018 to considerable fanfare. There was much hootin' and a hollerin' about how this reimagining of the best of COD 2 and COD 4 from a small indie studio would be the saviour to all things FPS. There were ambitious plans. A roadmap, no longer available on their site, covered much of last year, but I think it's also fair to say that the actual path through development didn't quite follow that road. I, like many others, drifted away. There seemed to be so little movement or things happening that initial enthusiasm from the early access launch started to peter out pretty quickly. From a peak of almost 17,000 players on February the 1st, 2018, just a month later on March 1st, that figure is in the region of 1,200, an almost 93% drop. And looking back, it's tough to see quite why things degraded so quickly. It's not like you would have expected major changes in those handful of weeks anyhow. It's just like the energy had gone. February the 1st, 2019, a year to the day since early access, looks pretty much like the main bulk of those intervening days. The player numbers are in double digits, never really getting above 100 concurrent users, which makes it incredibly hard to grow from. Matchmaking with those sort of numbers is basically a nightmare, which makes it an even worse experience for the people who actually do want to play. And if I'm honest, I thought the game was dead and buried. I did see some developer tweets talking about new things coming down the pipeline, but in my mind, whatever it was, it would just be too little too late. And at this point, like always folks, if you could just leave me some feedback, a thumb up or down for your general enjoyment of this video, I'd really appreciate it. Then on May 23rd, 2019, they launched Battalion 1944 1.0. The game had actually made it out of early access. Gone was the old Wartides competitive cards mode, and new was the full FACEIT integration. This gives a real CS style to the competitive aspect now. We're talking map bans, team captains, knife rounds to sort the sides, and so on. But in these changes there's a reworked economy that doesn't feature the old dropped card system. There is an economy though, so think eco and buy around style choices to be made. You do need a free FACEIT account to play in competitive now, and if I'm honest, none of these radical or positive changes really changes my impression of the competitive mode. If I'm not with friends, I don't particularly want to play it, and that's more of a personal preference thing to be honest. I admire the changes that have been made from afar, and I'm glad they offer something for players who want that kind of experience, but I'm okay here in the shallow end. I'm sorry, I believe they call that arcade mode. Yes, arcade is more of a casual experience. You're going to find multiple spawn-style modes with classic game types like capture the flag, team deathmatch, domination, that sort of thing. It's the perfect place to practice your aim or try out some ridiculous movement and bunny hops without the concerns of throwing a competitive game. I feel much more affinity with this mode. Perhaps when I was a bit younger and better, I'd have liked the search and destroy tension of comp, but these days I'm happy to respawn and carry on fragging. PS, of course, lying to myself there, I was never actually better at all. The gameplay is much as it was before in early access, but there are some changes, some better and some worse in my opinion. The weapons feel like they have more recoil than before, which I'm not a huge fan of. I'm not sure there's much skill ceiling added through adding recoil to weapons, or at least enjoyable skill ceiling, at least from my viewpoint. Weapon raising coming out of sprint feels sluggish on some weapons too, and for a game where you want more movement over something like CS, the penalty seems overly large. Options like the BAR feel limited far too much by it. On the upside though, the old sprinting system, which was both restrictive and provided no feedback before, has been replaced with infinite sprint, and the game feels so much better for it. The old system really added nothing to the game and provided only sort of staccato irritation to it. For old school fans of COD 2, Battalion really does feel amazing though. There's a fluidity that I don't recall from the beta that feels present now too. I don't know if that's just the removal of the sprinting cap or overall refinements. Either way, it feels great. Also, things that I mentioned in the Slipgate video about player feedback and making things feel rewarding, Battalion does that stuff really well. The weapon sounds have a punch, and even the mechanical noises have a sort of visceral immediacy to them. It sounds like the object really is in front of you. That feedback from hit and headshot sound is great too. It provides that little hit of reward and tells you that you did something great, without taking over the whole sort of audio landscape of the game, like kill streaks and guitar riffs and whatever else they added to the later CODs. There are new maps, 13 in total at launch. There are new weapons, with 24 in total at launch. And a new faction, as they're calling it, with the Russian side in the applicable maps, as this does indeed play to the Eastern Front subtitle that Battalion 1944 1.0 is releasing with. So, 1.0, and the title says Road to Redemption. So how are things going? Well, Shroud, and he's a big streamer by the way, if you don't stray to that side of the street, has been doing some pretty heavy lifting for the game. He's been playing a bunch, and with tens of thousands of people watching, that's advertising to an FPS heavy audience that a smaller title could really do with. He obviously enjoys the game too, which obviously helps, and he's quoted as saying that Battalion was probably the best first-person shooter out right now, which was picked up by some news outlets, and that feud, with heavy quotation marks, with other streamers like Dr. Disrespect over the game just is more free fuel to the marketing fire. The actual numbers tell a significantly different story to the early access release though. That spike and long tail from release that we see for many new titles isn't there this time. Instead, we have something altogether more promising. We have steady growth since 1.0 was released. It's not up to the levels of the original early access launch, and perhaps that flash in the pan isn't what's best for the game at this time. It's perhaps better for people who played before, perhaps thought it was effectively dead, like I did, to hear secondhand about the improvements and try the game again. For others to hear organically through friends or see someone else streaming it and have that spark of interest. That steady growth happened over a recent weekend too, with Monday's concurrent users peaking higher than Sundays, when normally you'd expect a drop on the start of the work week. I'm sure that's something the developers are particularly happy with. The game's player base is certainly much bigger than I would have imagined at this point just a few weeks ago, and that's even if I'd known the game was releasing. Performance is good, there's no real complaints. It doesn't really look like a sort of spectacular graphic marvel, but then it might not feel that close to the original CODs either if it did. It looks good enough, and the weapon skins, which more on later, and the weapon models look well made. And let's be frank, in competitive mode people are going to have everything on low, looking for performance configs to get some perceived or actual performance or visual advantage anyhow. That's just how these games go. As for cost, this is almost a $20 game in the US and almost £16 in the UK, so it's certainly not AAA pricing by any means. There's a free, well, not free, I guess, no additional cost Battle Pass system, as well for cosmetics, as you've seen in a bunch of games recently. As far as I know, it is free, but I don't know if there's an ongoing commitment for it to remain free going forward. And yeah, there are loot crates that you get for playing, and yeah, loot crates feels like the monetization model of 3 years ago. They're cosmetic only, though I'm not sure that's much of a defense these days, and you don't need a key to open them. Think about how Overwatch does them and you're kind of close, though Battalion has only one item per crate. As for platform, well, it's on Steam, so you're free to play for 2 hours to see if the game is for you, and refund it if it isn't to your liking. There's also been a 20% off sale running recently too, so if it's not running when you see this, I'd try some of the more notable game stores like GOG or Humble Bundle to see if they have it a bit cheaper. Though at $20 for full price, a 20% discount really isn't even enough for a bespoke barista-hewn coffee. It may not be a game for everyone, just like CS isn't, just like League isn't, and so on. But to focus on what you want it to be, and hope there are other people who want the same thing, is to make something altogether more pure. Big budget games have big budget worries. $150 million into a new FPS game, and hot damn, that thing better make its money back. So looking to appeal to more and more people, and try and increase the likelihood of getting that money back, can mean that the focus and the purity of your original design sort of gets muddied. Well, in Battalion 1944, you're probably going to get killed a lot. Meet some team who are just off the scale nuts in competitive mode, and it's going to suck, and you're going to lose. But if you want to get better at a game that rewards communication and teamwork and raw aim, train yourself and your friends into being that other team, then Battalion 1944 might just be a game for you. Please leave a comment below right now and tell me your thoughts about Battalion. Did you play the early access game? Were you even an original Kickstarter? Do you think this new old school sort of game is for you? Drop me a comment, I'll be reading every single one of them. Thank you so much for watching, please leave some feedback, maybe even tap the odd sub button if you like more gaming videos from this weird voiced British guy. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Take care.